The Fulfilling Life of Jimmy Carter by Ruth Sorenson. Jimmy Carter was in office as President of the United States of America for 4 years only. He was president from 1977 through 1981. During this time period, many different events occurred. President Jimmy Carter was born on October 1924 in a little town called Plains located in Georgia. As a young boy, he grew up in Archery, a little nearby community, and Jimmy Carter was drawn into farming just the same way his father, James Earl Carter, was. His family was surrounded by peanut crops, politic talk, and being faithful to the Baptist religion. While he attended school in a public school of Plains, his father took care of the crops and worked as a businessman. His mother, Lillian Gordy Carter, was working as a registered nurse. After graduating from high school, Jimmy Carter attended the Georgia Southwestern College, and later on the years he also attended the Institute of Technology. Attending to these institutes, he was able to receive a bachelor's degree in science from the United States Naval Academy in 1946. Since he became part of the naval forces, Jimmy Carter became a submariner, and while doing so, he was able to serve in the Atlantic and the Pacific fleets, which allowed him to raise his rank into becoming a lieutenant. As the years passed, Jimmy Carter married Rosalind Smith back in his town Plains in 1946, the same year he received his degree from the United States Naval Academy. Not too long into Jimmy's naval career, some bad news came. His father had been diagnosed with cancer. Jimmy decided to leave his promising naval career to go back to the farm where he started. In 1953, the Carters went back to the old peanut farm. Now Jimmy had Rosalind's help. She ended up contributing a lot to the business by modernizing and expanding the already profitable business into a huge peanut farm and warehouse facility. When Jimmy was 38, he started his career in politics. He surprised his wife with the idea of running for Senate, and she supported him. His father was the Senate for a short while before being diagnosed with cancer and his death. Jimmy had a great campaign and was very confident about the election. Sadly, the election did not turn out in his favor. His opponent had a very strong political stance and much professional help to back him up. He contested the results of the election and eventually became the senator himself. Jimmy was a quiet senator and did not seem to stand out very much. Although he was quiet, he was very effective. He always tried to make the pure-hearted decisions and remove corruption if he could. He had high ambitions and eventually wanted to become lieutenant governor. In 1966, Jimmy Carter ran to be a governor. He had a good campaign going but sadly lost to Carl Sanders. 4 years later, he decided to run in the 1970 election. Governor Carl Sanders again was running. Jimmy was still very determined and did what he always did. He worked hard. This time, with a lot of hard work, Jimmy had actually made it into office. He had tried to stand out the middle class, the average hard workers who were mainly white. It seemed to be a tough crowd to win over since many were segregationists. Jimmy was not for segregation at the time but seemed to find a way to word his speeches that were good enough to please them. In 1971, Jimmy set a blazing path against segregation while he was in office. He announced his stance on the issue and said that the time was here to change the outlook of the South and become equal with the rest of the country. Carter had brought many blacks into political jobs with him as well as women. Jimmy had a good approach to politics and would work very hard to push anything he strongly believed in. He was known for fighting hard to pass bills he knew were right. Jimmy had not been the governor for very long before he began to think about presidency. In 1972, Jimmy Carter traveled around the country with his wife to see what the voters wanted in a president. Many people were upset about the Watergate scandal and Nixon's time in office. The general public just wanted an honest, caring president, and that gained a lot of popularity with Jimmy there. He was honest and hardworking and never seemed to let people down. He ran for president in the 1976 election against the old president Gerald Ford. The election was known to be one of the closest in history, but Jimmy took the lead and won. The American economy was starting to worsen a lot at the time. Inflation was very high and people needed to start saving money. Jimmy asked Americans to turn down thermostats and make other sacrifices to conserve energy. He would turn the lights off around the Washington Monument from time to time. He also attacked wasteful government programs and made sure they would not stay in effect. Carter tried to also help the foreign nations as best as he could. He stopped the white colonial rule in Africa and improved the relations with Latin America. Jimmy also improved relationships within China and arms agreements with the Soviet Union. One of his most famous and well-known moments is when Carter was able to negotiate peace between the nations of Israel and Egypt. Inflation was very high at the time and many Americans were upset and on edge. The people of America were very angry and began to take out their frustration on the president. Under a lot of pressure, he decided to go to Camp David for 10 days to think and relax. He came back trying to ease the feelings over Americans, but it did not help much. More problems came when 53 Americans were taken hostage in Iran shortly after. The last year of Carter's presidency was very rough. He tried very hard to keep popularity with the people before the upcoming election. Ronald Reagan was running against him in the 1980 election. The American people were tired of the problems associated with Carter, so Reagan won by a landslide. After Reagan was elected, Jimmy Carter and his family moved back to Plains, Georgia to start back a quiet life without much attention. He began doing a lot of woodworking and actually taught classes at a nearby university. Even though times were rough, Carter was starting a comeback. He began working with Habitat for Humanity and helped build houses for the poor. His image to the public had greatly improved. Many people saw why they liked him in the first place. He reminded people of the principles he was elected on in the first place. In the time after his presidency, Carter had a presidential library in Atlanta. He then built the Carter Center next to it. The Carter Center was made to help foreign countries and end hunger and disease. The public liked the new image of the ex-president still helping the world after his term. Although he was helping many people, he did not like how he handled the new upcoming presidents. He seemed to be a monitor and tried to negotiate between George Bush and Bill Clinton. The public did not see him for very long after an argument with Clinton in 1994.